Hi students, we are back with my friend Elizabeth to talk about Agile auditing. And we're just going to jump right into it. We have heard a lot of people mention this concept of Agile, and I bet you guys have even in other classes, and you've heard it in other videos in this course, but no one has really explained exactly what that is. So Elizabeth, I'm going to put you on the spot right here at the beginning. Can you explain in just simple terms how you would explain Agile? And specifically, obviously, there is a difference between just Agile methodology and Agile auditing. So maybe kind of give a preview of both of those things.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, is the Agile methodology came about, I think, actually in the 70s as a result or as a way to try and do IT projects smarter and faster and more iterative. So the idea is really that rather than planning out the entire thing and then going in order step by step, and my teams always hate it when I use this word, but we chunk it and break it into smaller, more digestible pieces that can be done, but then also you check it off and you're done with that piece, and then you move on and you have a lot more concrete support to show for what you're doing. So in audit, it doesn't completely translate from IT to audit. And so there's Agile methodology, there's Agile audit, and I think that Agile audit incorporates a lot of Agile methodology into it. And I think that when IT teams use Agile, they're much more prescriptive than audit teams are. I think that it is important for us as auditors to take bits and pieces. What works for us, what works for a 150-member team isn't necessarily going to work for a 3-member team, but understanding some of the core components and then making it work.
I like that. And so instead of chunks, which, that is kind of an odd word to use, but I won't give you too big of a hard time about it. Sprints, right? They're technically called sprints in.
They are called sprints.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's right. But chunks, chunk sprints, however you want to define it. So I know you do a presentation for internal audit professionals. Can you share just a piece, tell us what you cover in that presentation and give the students an idea?
Absolutely. So what we're looking at here, this is just one of the slides that we have. Can you see it?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Perfect. So this explains traditional audit versus Agile audit. And I think that that's kind of an easy way to understand where we might have historically, or how we might have historically done things in internal audit versus an Agile approach and how it might do it. And I'm actually going to start at the bottom with this little graphic. So we have the waterfall approach in traditional. We have very defined planning stage. And I've been in audit shops where you literally do not start field work until you have checked that box that says you are done with planning. And then you do field work. And that's what you do. You do field work.
Yeah.
And then done with that, you do reporting. And so you go from one to the other versus if you look over here on Agile, it is a much more flexible, iterative approach. And as Joe said, these are sprints. So this is visually demonstrated as 3 2-week sprints. But you have each of these same phases in each sprint. So planning, field work, review / reporting. Planning, field work, review, or reporting. And you're doing that constantly and constantly reevaluating what is important, where are the highest risks, what maybe isn't as important as we thought when we first started scoping this out. If it's not important, we don't need to do it just because we thought we should go when we started planning. And I think that historically, a lot of time has been spent in planning, trying to figure out every single thing we could possibly need to know. But in the end, that's really not efficient. And so this is much more a learn as you go and audit smarter, not harder type of methodology. But one of the issues with traditional audit is that it's susceptible to bottlenecks and other inefficiencies, in part because you're so focused on staying in those discrete phases versus prioritizing according to the risk and the value, as I mentioned.
Mhm.
I think, and feel free to jump in if you want to jump in with
Yeah.
anything. But traditional audit also isn't quite as collaborative as Agile is. And I'm sure that you've heard in your other videos that you've done, internal audit these days is very much about collaboration with management, collaboration with our clients, collaboration with the board, versus us kind of sitting ourselves up on a pedestal and telling everyone, well, we're internal audit, you need to do it this way. And so part of that means having much more frequent communication, accepting influence from the client. And what I mean by that is not letting them dictate scope, not letting them tell us what to do, but really hearing them in terms of maybe this thing that we think is a really big deal really isn't an issue, and here's why. And having that more frequent communication, and in turn, then not having a lot of surprises at the end of the audit, because I think that one of the keys to having good relationships with management and with really all of our clients is not being the police people who are kind of working in secrecy and then bam, hit you with a report at the end and surprise you. There should not be any surprises in what we do. And so that's all discussed in weekly meetings. There should be a meeting every single week for an audit, even if it's just to discuss, what do we still need from you? What documentation do we need? What issues are we finding? How is the audit going? I don't think there's any value in keeping all of that a secret, unless it's something like an investigation that you need to keep much more confidential. And that really goes to this last point, which is traditionally, in traditional audit, I think the value is delayed until the end of the audit. And that can, especially for some larger audit shops where some audits can be just absolutely massive and take months and months, you could have an audit client that's like, well, what are they doing? What is the value that they're adding? Versus if you're constantly providing the recommendations and the feedback as part of these 2-week sprints, then they're understanding as you go the value that you add. And the last thing I'll add is also, if there are issues identified, you want to give people a chance as soon as you can to remediate them. There's no value to waiting to the end and then presenting a massive list of issues. Let them fix them. And then when the report does come out, it can say already remediated. It will still be in the report, but it'll show that it was already addressed. And that also shows awesome collaboration and communication with the client.
There was like so many fantastic things that you said in that, like, I don't know how long that was, but that was awesome. Thank you. My favorite thing that you said was accepting influence from your clients. So I think that's going to be my new favorite 2 words, because I love that. So many auditors are so worried about independence,
right?
That they stop talking to their clients altogether. And then you separate yourself so much that you're not even looking at the right risks or scoping in the right things. And so I really like that whole idea of accepting influence.
Well, and I think along with that is then that, again, like you said, the divide that happens. There's a chasm, if you will, between internal audit and the client. It also makes them a lot less likely to tell us things and ask for an audit in an area. It's so awesome when you work for a company and somebody comes and says, I want you to audit. I know it's not going to be punitive. It's not going to be a painful process. It's just going to help us get better. And that is so rewarding, but that comes from hearing them and listening to them and not just being the auditor. And being so strictly bound to that must be independent mindset.
Yeah,
because you can still be independent and operate this way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to go back to also say, what you said at the beginning about how every internal audit shop can implement Agile a little bit differently. And I want to kind of go back to that concept really quickly, because I think you're completely right. IT, when they're doing a project, they tend to be pretty strict in this Agile, approach. But for audit, when I think about some of the things that I've done in my past career as the director of internal audit, we were Agile, but we didn't do weekly meetings. We did weekly emails that just said, here's what we're waiting for. Here's what we found this week. Here's, just kind of updates, right? And when you think about it, even something like that is implementing a little piece of Agile framework. And so what I want the students to get out of this is it doesn't have to be, the whole methodology.
It's not all or nothing.
Yeah, exactly. It's not all or nothing, and you can kind of choose. And we've gone through obviously planning, field work, performance, and then reporting, which I like to call communicating now, right? And I love your visual of just saying we're doing all those three things. We're just doing it quicker, which I think is one downfall of our profession, is that sometimes our audits take way too long. So it's just doing everything more quicker. So I like to think of Agile obviously as more efficient in what we do. And one other thing I just want to mention, as you were talking, I'm thinking this is exactly what I love the term just-in-time auditing. So it's like looking at the right risks at the right time with the right people, it's all of that. And I think Agile auditing really makes us do that quicker, right? And it's really just-in-time auditing. So I like that.
Absolutely.
How do you see now? I mean, I say we've been really embracing this as a profession maybe over the last, 5 years? I mean, it really hasn't been that, I don't know. Some of us have probably been doing it longer than others, but how do you see it making internal audit shops better or more efficient? Like, I think it's everything you've probably talked about: communication, better rapport with the client. Any other things?
I think that it kind of, for lack of a better term, it cuts out a lot of the fat in terms of, one of the things I like to focus on is Agile audit reporting and completely redoing your audit report and taking it from 15-page, just honestly snooze fest that you can't even read the entire thing, to a crisper, smarter, shorter audit report that really, if you've got an executive or someone on the board who they have 30 seconds to read that, they can go straight to the conclusion, read the conclusion. If that's all they read, they still know what they need to know about how that audit went. And I think that that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, it's made us better communicators ultimately, I think. Yeah, and like you said, either verbal, because we did used to be holding in our issues until the end. I know when I first started in 2005, that's what we did. It's like, don't tell them what you found until the end. And so it's making us more, efficient, effective communicators throughout. It doesn't make the end of an audit project as scary, because you've been talking about these issues transparently throughout the project. And now going into an end meeting where you're going through the whole report isn't nearly as daunting.
Right.
So, yeah.
And it's interesting because it's not even just confined to an audit project. I think that the Agile components can be taken throughout your entire, methodology for your department. And so as part of that, we would have either monthly or quarterly or semi-annual, depending on what part of the audit universe we were talking about, but we would have collaboration meetings with our client, and we would let them know maybe in Q1, you've got an audit coming up in Q4. This is what we're going to be looking at. This is what we're going to be looking for. And I think historically we were taught, well, don't tell them. If you tell them, then they might fix it. And as I've gone through my career, I'm like, isn't that the point, that they fix it?
We want them to fix it. Yeah.
If we find it, or if if they know and fix it ahead of time, the point is to make the organization safer and smarter. And so I think embracing that mindset of it doesn't need to be internal audit, kind of getting the credit, because I think we can show our value in so many ways. But really implementing these different agile methodologies across the board.
Yeah, I love that. I was literally, as you're talking, I'm like, yep, I've totally been that, that like they want us to do surprise audits, right? And they don't want to, you don't want to tell them you're coming, but there is value in telling them that you're coming and getting ready for that, and maybe good things come out of that. So yeah, that was funny.
If you're going to do it better all year before you come in Q4, then why not? That's awesome.
Yeah. That's so funny. Well, thank you so much for sharing Agile with us. I've been ending some of these interviews with advice for students. So, I'm thinking as we're talking, there are so many benefits to being Agile in our own personal lives. I think that's one piece of advice I would give students. But what else would you say to students?
So I'm going to end with my motto, and I don't think it'll get you your E rating. But my motto is don't be an asshole. And what I mean by that is, there is room for all of us to succeed in our personal lives, in our professional lives. Let's just help each other out and build each other up and just be kind to each other. And I think that the other thing that's really important with audit specifically is be curious. It doesn't just have to do with accepting an answer that a client might give you, but it's also just constantly wondering, why are they doing it this way? Is there a better way to do it? You can ask the question, maybe the answer is no, and that's okay too. Don't be afraid to fail. I think that normalizing failure is really important. And so, yeah, I've got a lot of advice. We could do a whole nother section on that.
I love it. Well, those two things are fantastic. So be kind and be curious, right? We'll leave them with those two things. Elizabeth, thanks so much. Thanks for being a great friend, and thanks for sharing with the students.
Thank you.